I woke up to a peaceful morning, the sunlight streaming in through the curtains, filling the kitchen with a warm, golden light. There I was, flipping pancakes, my movements smooth from years of practice. As the smell of breakfast filled the air, Rachel, my wife, walked in, casually adjusting the belt on her robe. Her hair shimmered in the sunlight, and she smiled as she headed to the coffee pot. "Smells amazing in here," she said with a bright smile, pouring herself a cup. I turned to her, feeling a familiar warmth in my chest. "Only the best for our special day," I replied, setting a plate of pancakes on the table, which I'd already laid out with fresh berries and syrup. For a moment, Rachel hesitated, her smile faltering slightly before she joined me at the table. As she took a sip of her coffee, I could tell something was on her mind. She glanced up at me, her expression more playful now. "You really went all out this morning. 43 years of marriage deserves a big celebration," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. But as I squeezed her hand, something in her shifted. Her smile wavered, and she pulled her hand away, tucking her hair behind her ear. I need to talk to you," she began, her voice low, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. That's when a knot of unease started forming in my chest. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm, but I could feel the worry creeping in. She traced her fingers around the edge of her cup, avoiding eye contact. "Something came up at work," she finally said, still not looking at me. "It's really important, and I have to be there tonight." She paused before adding, "I'm sorry, I know we had plans." Her words hung in the air like a weight between us. I forced a smile, even though disappointment tugged at me. "Work can be unpredictable, I get it," I said, doing my best to keep things light. But deep down, something didn't feel right. She quickly grabbed my hand again, her tone softer now. "I promise I'll make it up to you when I get back." Her words were sweet, but something about the way she said it felt off. "All that matters is you're safe and happy," I replied, my heart aching slightly as she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. She got up to put her plate in the sink, moving with an odd sense of urgency. "I should get ready," she said, already halfway up the stairs before I could say anything else. I sat there, staring at the plate of pancakes, my stomach twisting with doubt. Something about the way she was acting was gnawing at me, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was just overthinking things. As she disappeared upstairs, I stayed at the table, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. Upstairs, I heard the faint sound of her phone buzzing, followed by a soft chuckle. It was a sound I hadn't heard in a while, and for some reason, it filled me with a strange sense of unease. When Rachel went upstairs, I stayed behind in the kitchen, staring at my coffee cup and trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. She wasn't acting like herself, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Sure, work could get stressful for her, but this felt different. It wasn't like her to pull away from me on a day like this, especially when we were supposed to be celebrating our anniversary. I could hear her moving around upstairs, and then I caught the faint sound of her phone buzzing. I knew she had to be dealing with something important, but the way she rushed off like that just didn't sit right with me. I tried to ignore the nagging thoughts creeping into my mind, but they wouldn't let go. While I stood there, thinking about how distant she had seemed, I heard a soft laugh from upstairs. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my chest tighten. It had been a long time since I'd heard her laugh like that, so carefree, so happy. But for some reason, it didn't feel like that laugh was meant for me. I busied myself cleaning the kitchen, scrubbing down the counters, anything to keep my mind off the weird feeling growing inside. But no matter how hard I tried, my thoughts kept circling back to Rachel and the way she had pulled away from me earlier. Then an idea hit me. I didn't want to spend the evening alone, not when Rachel was off at some last-minute work event. So, I grabbed my phone and called Linda, my sister-in-law. "Hey, Linda. It's Jake," I said, trying to sound upbeat even though my heart wasn't fully in it. "Rachel's got a work thing tonight, and I thought maybe we could grab dinner if you're free." There was a brief pause on the other end, but then I heard her familiar, warm voice. "Jake, I'd love that. I don't have any plans tonight." "Great," I said, feeling a bit of relief. "How about that Italian place you love?" "That sounds perfect," she replied, her tone full of excitement. It felt good to have something to look forward to, something to take my mind off this strange feeling that wouldn't go away. As I hung up the phone, I felt a bit better. It wasn't how I had planned to spend the evening, but at least I wouldn't be sitting at home, wondering why Rachel had seemed so distracted. A few minutes later, Rachel came back downstairs, suitcase in hand, looking ready to leave. She was dressed to impress, like she always was for work, but something about the way she carried herself was different. She seemed distant. I met her at the bottom of the stairs, taking the suitcase from her. "Let me get that for you," I said, trying to help. "Thanks," she said, giving me a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She seemed like she was already somewhere else, like her mind was far from me and our home. "I should head out now if I want to beat the traffic," she added. I followed her outside, placing the suitcase in the trunk, and before she got into the car, I turned to her. "Call me when you get there, okay?" I said, trying to keep my voice light, even though that uneasy feeling was still gnawing at me. "Of course," she said, leaning in to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Don't miss me too much?" I forced a smile. "I always miss you," I said, stepping back as she got into the car. She waved as she pulled out of the driveway, and I watched her drive away, the knot in my stomach tightening with each second she was out of sight. Once she was gone, I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the empty street, wondering if I was just overthinking things. But then, as soon as she turned the corner, something changed. Rachel's whole attitude seemed to shift. She grabbed her phone, dialing someone quickly, and I could see from the way she was talking, so full of excitement, so eager, that whoever was on the other end of that line wasn't just a colleague. "I'm on my way," she said, her voice full of anticipation. I didn't hear the response, but I knew in my gut it wasn't good. Whoever it was, she was more than just excited to see them, she couldn't wait. Meanwhile, I stood on the porch, trying to shake off the feeling that something was seriously wrong. I turned and headed back inside, trying to focus on my plans with Linda for dinner, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop the thoughts from swirling around in my head. Something about the way Rachel had left made me feel like the ground beneath my feet was starting to crack, and I wasn't sure what I was going to find when the truth finally came out. After Rachel drove away, I went back inside, trying to calm my nerves and push away the uneasy feeling that had settled in my chest. I told myself it was just me overthinking things, that I was being paranoid for no reason. She'd said it was work and I had to trust her. But still, something about the way she had been acting gnawed at me. I busied myself with little tasks around the house, trying to keep my mind off of it. There wasn't much to do, the house was quiet, almost too quiet. I sat down with my phone and scrolled mindlessly, trying to distract myself from the creeping sense of dread that had taken root. Rachel hadn't even been gone an hour, and already, I was struggling to push away the thought that something wasn't right. The hours passed slowly, and the thought of my dinner plans with Linda helped ease some of my nerves. Linda had always been easy to talk to, someone I could count on when I needed a bit of company or a friendly ear. She was family after all, and over the years, we'd become close. Dinner with her seemed like the perfect distraction from the nagging doubts swirling in my mind. As I finished getting ready, I kept glancing at the clock, wondering if Rachel would call or text once she got to her destination. But no message came and no phone call. Maybe she was just busy, I told myself, trying to shove the worries aside. By the time I got to the restaurant to meet Linda, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. The warm glow of the restaurant lights spilling onto the sidewalk felt like a small comfort. Linda waved from a table near the back, already smiling, her energy contagious as always. "Jake, it's so good to see you," she greeted me with a hug. "I'm glad you called. It's been too long since we've had dinner." "Yeah, same here," I said, trying to return her enthusiasm. But even as we sat down and started chatting, my thoughts kept drifting back to Rachel. I tried my best to focus on Linda, to enjoy the evening, but in the back of my mind, that feeling of unease wouldn't let go. Over dinner, we talked about everything from work to family to random memories from years ago. Linda was great at keeping the conversation light, and for a while I started to feel a little more at ease. But somewhere in the middle of the meal, my phone buzzed, and my heart jumped. For a split second, I thought it might be Rachel finally checking in, But when I glanced at the screen, it was just a notification from the news app. I put my phone back down, trying to refocus on the conversation with Linda. Still, the silence from Rachel was eating away at me. "You okay?" Linda asked, noticing my distraction. "Yeah, I don't know," I said, trying to find the right words. "Rachel's been acting a little off lately. I think it's just work, but something's been bugging me about it." Linda gave me a concerned look. "You two have always been so solid." "I'm sure it's nothing serious," she said, reaching across the table to give my hand a reassuring squeeze. "Yeah, you're probably right," I muttered, but even as I said it, doubt lingered in my mind. After dinner, I walked Linda to her car, still trying to push away the nagging thoughts about Rachel. We said our goodbyes, and I promised we'd do this again soon, though my mind was only half present. As I drove home, the empty house I was heading back to felt heavier with each passing mile. When I finally got back and walked inside, the silence was deafening. Normally, Rachel would have texted me by now, but the longer I sat there waiting for a message, the more that uncomfortable feeling grew. I sat down on the couch, staring at my phone, waiting for it to buzz, waiting for any kind of sign that Rachel had made it safely to her work event. But nothing came. Hours passed, and the house felt like it was closing in on me, the quiet stretching on and on. That's when the idea hit me. I needed to know where she was. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen as I considered checking the location tracker we had set up on each other's phones years ago. It was one of those things we did out of convenience. Nothing sneaky or controlling, just a way to make sure we knew where the other was in case of emergencies. But tonight it felt different. I wasn't sure if I was ready to know the truth, whatever it might be. My thumb lingered over the app, and my heart raced with anticipation and fear all at once. Finally, I opened it. As the screen loaded, my stomach tightened, a mixture of dread and curiosity overwhelming me. When the map finally appeared, my heart dropped. Rachel wasn't anywhere near her supposed work event. In fact, she wasn't even in the city. She was at a hotel. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My mind raced through a million possibilities, but none of them felt right. And as I sat there, my phone in my hand, reality began to settle in. Rachel wasn't at work. She wasn't where she said she would be. And the pieces of the puzzle that had been nagging at me all day finally clicked into place. I knew, without a doubt, that something was very wrong. I sat there in shock, my eyes glued to the phone screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. Rachel's location on the map wasn't even close to her work event. She was at a hotel. My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I tried to process it all. Every instinct I had told me something was wrong, but now I had proof staring back at me. She had lied. I wanted to tell myself that there had to be a logical explanation, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. The way she had been acting all day, the sudden change in her mood, the rush to leave, it all made sense now, and it felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't sit still any longer. My mind was spinning, and the quiet house suddenly felt suffocating. I grabbed my car keys, barely thinking about what I was doing. Before I knew it, I was in the car, driving toward the hotel. My thoughts were racing as fast as the car was, a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and confusion swirling around in my head. What was she doing there? Who was she with? The questions pounded in my brain, each one more painful than the last. As I got closer to the hotel, the reality of the situation hit me harder. I wasn't ready for what I might find, but I couldn't stop myself either. I needed to know the truth. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and parked at the far end, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I sat there for a moment, staring at the building, trying to gather the courage to get out of the car. My stomach twisted into knots as I thought about what was waiting for me inside. A part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to see. But another part of me, the part that needed answers, wouldn't let me turn back. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and made my way to the entrance, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The hotel lobby was quiet, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I approached the front desk, and for a second, I considered asking for her room number. But something held me back. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. Instead, I walked past the desk, heading toward the elevators. I didn't know exactly where she was, but I had a feeling. My mind kept running through possibilities, each one worse than the last. I stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a soft ding that felt far too final. As the elevator rose, my anxiety grew. When the doors opened, I stepped out onto the third floor and began walking down the hallway, glancing at the room numbers. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my palms were sweating as I reached the door I somehow knew was hers. Room 210. I stood there, frozen for a moment, staring at the door, my hand hovering just inches from the handle. Part of me wanted to walk away, to pretend I hadn't come this far. But I couldn't. I had to know. I needed to see with my own eyes. With a deep breath, I finally turned the handle and pushed the door open. What I saw inside made my heart stop. There she was, Rachel, wrapped in the arms of another man. They were standing by the window, his hands resting on her waist, and their faces were so close it was clear they'd been together like this for a while. The sound of the door opening startled them both, and Rachel spun around to face me, her eyes wide with shock and fear. She breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there, frozen in place, my mind reeling. I didn't say a word at first. I couldn't. Everything I had feared, everything I had suspected, was right in front of me. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted for so many years, was standing there with someone else. The man, a tall guy with dark hair and a smug look on his face, didn't move. He didn't even try to explain. He just stood there, watching me, like he knew he had won something I hadn't even realized I was losing. Rachel took a step toward me, her face pale. "I can explain," she started, but the words felt empty. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want to hear anything from her at that moment. My voice came out hoarse and broken, barely louder than a whisper. "How long?" I asked, my throat tight, my heart feeling like it was being torn apart. Rachel opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her silence said more than any words could. She couldn't even bring herself to answer the question. And that's when I knew, this wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't some mistake. This had been going on for a while, and I had been completely blind to it. The room seemed to close in around me, the weight of her betrayal crushing down on my chest. I turned to leave, my legs feeling weak beneath me. I didn't want to be there anymore. I couldn't stand to look at her, to look at them. As I walked out of the hotel room, Rachel called after me, her voice desperate now. "Jake, please wait." But I didn't stop. I didn't even turn around. I kept walking, numb to everything around me. The hotel, the quiet parking lot, the sound of my car door slamming shut, it all blurred together as I drove away, trying to escape the reality that my marriage had just crumbled in front of me. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, unsure of where to go or how to process what had just happened. My mind was a mess, stuck on the image of Rachel in that hotel room with another man. I couldn't shake it. It played over and over in my head, each time cutting deeper into me. 43 years of marriage, trust, and building a life together. All of it now felt like it had been built on lies. How many times had she deceived me, pretending she was at work while sneaking off to meet him? How long had I been blind to this? I kept thinking back to that morning, how she had acted, pulling away from me at the breakfast table. The excuses about work had seemed off then, but I had ignored it, choosing to trust her like I always had. But now I knew better. I had ignored all the signs, not wanting to see what was right in front of me. Eventually, I found myself back in front of our house. It was late, and the street was quiet, the house looming in the darkness like a stranger's home. I sat there for a moment, wondering how I could step inside, knowing what I knew now. But I had no other choice. It was still my home, even if it no longer felt that way. As I stepped through the front door, everything looked the same, yet nothing felt right. The photos on the walls of our family, of Rachel and me, felt like cruel reminders of a life that no longer existed. It was like looking at someone else's memories, not my own. The weight of the silence in the house pressed down on me as I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. Well, now, I wanted to confront her again, to demand answers, but what was the point? She had already shown me what kind of person she was. She had made her choice, and nothing she said would change that. The betrayal was too deep, too painful. Time passed slowly as I sat there, trying to process everything. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the hotel, or the way she had smiled when she thought she was getting away with it. That smile, it made me sick to my stomach. And then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. For a moment, I froze, half expecting it to be Rachel, trying to explain. But when I glanced at the screen, I felt my heart sink. It wasn't her. It was a text from Laura, her sister. I opened the message, and what I saw knocked the wind out of me. It was a photo of Laura and Bernard, my brother-in-law. They were sitting on my couch, in my house, kissing. And this wasn't just some innocent peck on the cheek. This was passionate, the kind of kiss that said this wasn't a one-time thing. This had been going on for a while, just like Rachel's affair. But it wasn't just the photo that gutted me. It was the message beneath it that drove the knife in deeper. Asterisk need him? Well, now he's yours. I took your wife, and guess what? You're homeless now. I'll be with Rachel from now on, asterisk. I stared at those words, unable to believe what I was seeing. Rachel and Bernard? My own brother-in-law had been with my wife? My mind was spinning, trying to piece it all together. How had this happened? How long had they been betraying me like this? Rage welled up inside me, hot and suffocating. I threw the phone down, my hands shaking. I wanted to destroy something, anything, to release the overwhelming anger and betrayal I felt. Not only had Rachel torn apart our life, but my own family had been in on it. My brother-in-law. The betrayal was too much to bear. I couldn't think straight. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or who to turn to. It felt like my entire world had crumbled in a matter of hours, and I was standing in the rubble, completely alone. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat there, numb and motionless, the silence of the house pressing in on me like a weight. I couldn't stop thinking about that photo, the one Laura had sent me. Bernard and Rachel, together, in my own home. It was a level of betrayal I hadn't even considered. The woman I'd spent over 4 decades with had not only lied to me but had done it with someone I considered family. How could they do this to me? How could they stand in my home, smile, and kiss while knowing what they were doing behind my back? The anger bubbled up again, but this time it wasn't just a flash of rage, it was deeper, colder, and more permanent. I wasn't just mad. I felt something inside me break. I looked around the house, and all I saw were reminders of the life Rachel and I had built together. The photos of our family vacations, the framed picture of our wedding day, and even the small trinkets we'd picked up over the years. But now, all of it felt meaningless. Every happy memory felt like a lie. The sound of my phone buzzing snapped me out of my thoughts. This time, it was Rachel. The screen lit up with her name, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I just stared at it, watching it vibrate on the table, wondering what she could possibly say to make this right. Nothing could fix this. Finally, I picked up the phone and opened her message. It was short. Asterisk Jake, I know you're angry, but please, we need to talk. I'm coming home, asterisk. Coming home? The idea of her walking back into this house, acting like she could explain away everything she'd done, made my blood boil. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her excuses. But more than that, I didn't want to live in this nightmare any longer. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. I couldn't be here when she got back. I couldn't sit in the same room with her, knowing that everything we'd built together was a lie. Without thinking, I grabbed my car keys and headed out the door, slamming it behind me. As I drove through the empty streets, I had no destination in mind. I just needed to get away, to clear my head. But no matter how far I drove, the weight of what had happened sat heavy in my chest. My marriage was over, my family had betrayed me, and the life I thought I had was gone. Eventually, I pulled over at a park I hadn't been to in years. I sat in the car, staring out at the darkness, my mind blank. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how to move forward from this. Everything felt broken beyond repair. After what felt like hours, I finally made the decision I had been avoiding. I pulled out my phone and dialed a lawyer. I didn't even hesitate. The minute he picked up, I told him everything. I didn't hold back, laying out every painful detail. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end. "I'm sorry, Jake," the lawyer said softly. "We'll get started on the divorce. You'll need to meet with me tomorrow to discuss the next steps." Divorce. The word echoed in my head, and for the first time, it felt real. This was the end. After everything we had been through together, Rachel and I were finished. I would never look at her the same way again. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of finality wash over me. There was no going back now. The drive home was long, and when I finally pulled into the driveway, I saw Rachel's car parked in its usual spot. The house lights were on, and I could see her silhouette moving inside. A part of me wanted to walk in, confront her one last time, scream at her for everything she'd done. But another part of me, the part that was tired and broken, just wanted to leave. I stayed in the car, watching the house from a distance, wondering how we had gotten here. I had loved her, trusted her, built a life with her. And now it was all over. I knew I had to face her eventually, but not tonight. Tonight I needed to let go. I needed to find a way to move on from the wreckage she'd left behind. I took a deep breath, started the car, and drove off into the night, leaving behind the life I once knew. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching my videos, sharing them, and supporting me along the way. Your views, comments, and likes are the driving force behind my passion to create captivating and unexpected stories. Every tale I share is more than just a plot. It's a journey of emotions, lessons, and reflections that we experience together. Your engagement brings life and soul to this channel. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of each video, because the finale of every story is where the real impact lies. I promise to continue delivering twists and turns that surprise, inspire, and resonate with your hearts.